listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Tomo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book. I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Captain.
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 Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain. Captain.
No, not yet. Don't pass out on me yet.
Terrain. Pull up.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. Of course you realize this means war.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spell it with a K, a mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where late at night you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that petrifying edifice. And late at night, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, palatial, and effulgently bulbous SHR Media studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from that mentally destitute column structure aforementioned. It is 2020. The time is nigh. The epic is now. The leftist madness is afoot, and the criticality is imperative. There is no law, no rule, no tradition, no fact, no history, no logic, no rationality, no proportion, no context, no intent, no tradition, no bit of normality. The Demorats, leftists, and American media maggots won't break, kill, slice, mutilate, bury, eliminate, ignore, butcher, threaten, explode, incinerate, throttle, or expunge in order to wrest the reins of power and keep America subjugated in perpetuity for unicorns and fairy farts. So make no mistake, 2020 isn't truly about Demorats or Republicans. It's instead about the fight against socialism and ultimately communism. Systems responsible for the death of at least 100 million people in just the last 100 years. So we stand to lose this country not from without, but from within, from the enemies within, due to the keening and purposely cultivated ignorance of the masses. No less than our U.S. Constitution and its Bill of Rights. Our very freedoms and liberties are at stake. And I will not stand by and watch this nation devolve and its values, mores, and morals be cavalierly subsumed by those with no interest or care in her success. So make no mistake, this nation is at a tipping point, because when we fail, the rest of the world follows suit. When freedom and liberty can no longer be found in the United States, what nation exists to step up? So tonight is going to be a really interesting night in both the first hour and the second hour. The first hour, I have a great returning guest. The second hour is one of those experiments from BZ where this is either going to work or it's going to crash in flames. And perhaps at this point you're saying, self, I wonder what BZ means. Well, I've got Mike Fitzgerald, who is Fitzpatrick, who is a great cybersecurity expert, the founder and CEO of a great company. That sounded like Trump there just for a second. And then in the second hour, I have a forbidden video to play for you. Well, let me tell you this. You can listen and chat at shrmedia.com now. That's the audio version of this on Spreaker. So in your favorite search engine, if you go to Spreaker.com and put Berserk Bobcat Saloon, you'll find my show. And it's on right now. If you go to SHRmedia.com, you'll see the show right now, and you can go into the chat room. You can listen to it. But I also live stream on two separate sources, video. One of them is on Facebook. The reason I was delayed tonight is because Facebook was not that interested in shaking hands with me until I made them shake hands. Plan B is I'm also running YouTube. So at the conclusion of this show, if YouTube decides to eliminate me wholesale, don't say I didn't warn you. So if you happen to be watching on YouTube Live right now, because I'm streaming on YouTube from the SHR Media Network, go into YouTube and subscribe to our channel, SHR Media, and you'll be able to see under SHR Media, I'm live. Click on that. You can watch it through YouTube. Same thing for Facebook, SHR Media on Facebook. Click, boom, there you go. Now, the interesting part of this is no matter what happens, I will always be on Spreaker tonight. But I'm going to be very curious at the conclusion of this 2-hour show whether YouTube keeps me or whether Facebook decides to keep me. So that'll be... I can't tell you why right now, because that would kind of spoil the fun. But I'm going to do something that apparently big tech thinks I ought not to be doing. Speaking of big tech, folks, I have had some great guests before, but none who seemed so easy to talk to, who just seemed to fit right into the show. And I'm talking about none other than Mike Fitzpatrick, who is CEO of NCX Group, a shadowy bunch of shady characters and rapscallions that can likely shut off my internet with the wave of a hand and cause my credit score to plummet. Experian, boom, done, gone, BZ. You won't be buying on anything on credit again. Oh, wait, no, that's the NSA that does that. Okay. So, hey, General Nakasone, like I said before, hello. Now, perhaps you're wondering, again, how a techno-Luddite such as me could have a man on the show who's all about technology. Well, the answer is easy. Mike Fitzpatrick speaks actual English. He has a command of the English language that even I can understand. So I'd like to welcome Mike Fitzpatrick back to the saloon. Good evening, Mike, and thank you kindly for being here tonight, sir.
BZ, my pleasure, man. I've been looking forward to this all day.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, the other thing is, you and I have been corresponding back and forth kind of since the beginning of all this Wuhan 19 foolishness, talking about what we've been observing in the Northern California area and the Southern California area, because you're down in Southern California. We'll get to that. So this is interesting. I just became aware of this today. Mike Fitzpatrick, do you realize that it was 3 months ago to this specific day, on a Tuesday, that I had you in the saloon? I had you here. You came into the saloon January 28th of 2020, exactly 3 months ago on a Tuesday on the 28th. I thought that was kind of weird.
Yeah, you know, BC, it is interesting. It almost feels like, I mean, this week, we're only 2 days into this week, and it feels like it's been a month. Time is dragging since the occupation.
Yeah. Now people know why I call it Occupied California. Always spell it with a K. Mike, I first heard you on Money Talk with Melanie And Money Talk with Melanie, folks, if you're not aware, is a show every Friday right here on the SHR Media Network. That Friday night, you and I just gabbed like crazy for 2 hours straight about a lot of cool stuff, and we determined that we had a lot of stuff in interest and in common, and I got to tell you, it really was a great conversation. But before we get into the topics, for those people who didn't hear you the first time back on January 28th, can you tell folks a little bit about your background? And then after that, I want to have you tell folks what is the NCX group and what does it do. So a little bit about your background, Mike Fitzpatrick, if you could please, sir.
Sure. So from a job standpoint or profession standpoint, I've been in high tech for almost 40 years now. Started as a mere child back in 1982. And through that time, I've gone from the days of a startup in days of Apple II with 8K of RAM, a floppy disk drive, and a green screen monitor to where we are now with massive amounts of data every day, new threats that we never even envisioned 20 years ago when I started NCX Group, is really one of the first cybersecurity consulting firms. There were a couple of companies that did some things, but nobody really dedicated to the art of cybersecurity in the private sector, and there certainly wasn't anybody working with small to mid-sized businesses across the country. And so we work both nationally and internationally, working with businesses to mitigate the risks associated with today's technology.
So the NCX group, does that stand for anything in particular? You're the founder and the CEO of NCX Group. So what specifically do they do? People come to you because they perceive they have a cybersecurity problem if they're a business?
Well, in a lot of cases, it really comes down to, it's like a lot of things in life, right? You have to realize first that you have a problem and that that you need to get some help. So in this particular case, we have companies that realize they have issues, whether that's compliance or the data that they have within in-house needs to be protected, and they need to take steps to mitigate that risk because of legislation, because of laws, and sometimes just because it's the right thing to do. So the NCX, it was interesting because as you were asking the question, it actually flashed back in my mind when I named the company 18 years ago. It turned out that there was one other reference to NCX on Google, period. And it had to do with a virus that was discovered by a bio company in North Carolina, as I recall. So it's funny that here we are doing cybersecurity, viruses and malware and all of that is the bane of everybody's existence now. And NCX, outside of knowing anything about this other group, actually relates to a virus. It's kismet.
That's kind of weird, but yet kind of strangely interesting. Now that we have some background for those who may not have heard you on the show the first time 3 months ago, since then, everything has been turned upside down. So my first question for you tonight is this. Has cybersecurity become less important or more important since the Wuhan 19 has struck all over the planet?
From a business standpoint, it actually has become more important because with everybody working remotely now in ways that businesses and organizations never intended for people to work, the attack surface, the opportunity for a hacker to take advantage of a company, an employee, an opportunity has grown exponentially. So what used to be inside of a company, a corporation, a business, a public sector entity, is now outside the confines of those walls and is working remotely. I had a conversation yesterday with one of our community college clients, and even their business offices have been dispersed to working from home. And it may be this way for this particular community college district until, get this, spring of 21 is what they're planning for, having students back on campus.
Wow.
So, and I asked the question, I said, because we were talking about a new contract, a new engagement, and we were discussing some of the terms and payment and things like that. And I was asking the question, are you guys doing things electronically now? And he said, no, we haven't made that jump yet. The business offices are working from home now. And I said, well, that's interesting. They said, did you send them home with checks? Because if you did, that's a security risk. But no, they are still cutting checks inside the building. But it's one of those things that you have to think about. There's so many businesses that have absolutely struggled with this. IT teams are still struggling with supporting remote users on a day in, day out basis when they don't have access to all of their tool sets that they use. I'm talking about IT departments, IT groups, on a day in, day out basis. So it makes it really complicated from that standpoint. My son's university, I mean, we're not looking at being back on campus right now until fall, and that's probably going to extend into the spring. So it's very complicated. IT is overwhelmed. Security is more important than ever. There are the takeaways from that.
Well, not to mention, and I'm not sure I'm even going to have time for that tonight, not to mention like things like GoToMeeting, Zoom, etc. Those apparently are having issues in and of themselves. I really don't want to address that tonight. Earlier the first show, we talked about the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA. Tonight I want to focus on more current events. So Mike FITZGERALD, I'm talking to Mike FITZGERALD, who is CEO, founder of NCX Group, a cybersecurity firm. I'd like to talk about the recent hack into the Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the Maryland-based National Institute of Health, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and the World Bank, all in one. Apparently, in this hack, as far as I know, emails, passwords, and a whole bunch of documents were stolen, and then posted on the internet. Now, to me, this seems huge. And because I am not a big fan of Quinky-Dink, this, to me, seems far from coincidental. Now, Mike FITZGERALD, any thoughts or information about this hack? Why it might be important, pretty important, that kind of thing?
Well, it's interesting. As we were exchanging text messages over the last several weeks, I think I pointed out or said something to the effect, I'd have to go back and look. I think at some point in time that the hackers will become interested, because the hackers, they're a really interesting group. They all have lines that they don't want crossed, that they view as important. And forced vaccination and global pandemics seem to would get the attention of most people, and hackers fall into that realm. So I'm not surprised that there's a breach. There's really not a lot of data out there as far as how, or outside of what was posted, what else might have been accessed. So we're still kind of in the dark as they go through the analysis of it. Again, I'm not surprised that there would be some type of attempt with some type of action taken.
Now, that having been said, my first thought was China. Chinese hackers are at work around the globe 24/7. They have, my last understanding is they have a personnel contingent of 50,000 to 100,000 hackers working for the People's Republic of China. So, Mike Fitzpatrick, two questions. Do you think maybe China was involved in this, and or what was the purpose of this on such a wide number, a large number of entities that they hacked?
You know, at any point in time, BZ, there are nation-state actors hacking other nation-state actors and individual entities left and right, along with hacktivist groups. I really don't want to speculate on who it might be at this point until some more information is known. I mean, it's the wild, wild west. If you've ever watched, and sometime I'll have to send it to you, we actually did a capture when we were setting up a cyber threat hunt engagement for a client. The tap, the sensor, ended up placed on the wrong side of the firewall. What we ended up capturing were a series of attacks from around the world on this entity, and they were originating out of Ukraine. They were coming out of Russia, China, Pakistan. I mean, global attacks on this particular business from around the world, and it's 2 minutes of just nonstop attacks. So this is going on every day. In our monitoring services, in our managed security services, you know, we've seen China, and it's well known that they have been mapping literally every network that's out there, regardless of what they do, what the size is. They're inventorying what's there, or at least that's the way it appears. So, you know, Again, it's really hard to say where the attack came from. There's not a lot of information on it. A lot of things posted to paste bin, I think it was, in looking at it and doing a little research on it today. The attack is not surprising because, again, a lot of these hackers, a lot of these activists, you know, they see themselves as freedom fighters in a lot of respects. And I made the comment years ago that at some point in time, there'll come a point in time where the last line of defense are going to be the hackers. And we may be hitting some of that now.
Okay, the last line of national defense?
The last line of freedom
will be hackers. You
know, you never know. Eventually, everybody gets affected, right? I mean, it goes back to Nazi Germany. You know, they came for the Jews, they came for the blacks, they came for the Catholics. They, you know, finally, who's left to protect you, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Right, Pastor Niemöller's statement.
Yep.
This is an important topic, and I can see already I'm not going to get to a fraction of this. So, folks, I'm not going to do a bottom of the hour break. I'll just do a little station ID thing. In the process of researching this for show prep today, Mike Fitzpatrick, who I'm talking to, founder and CEO of NCX Group, I came across an article from Radio Free Asia, which says Vietnam hackers targeted the Chinese government to get information on COVID-19. The article says on April 22nd, FireEye, a cybersecurity firm, reported that, quote, from at least January to April 2020, suspected Vietnamese actors APT-32 carried out intrusion campaigns against Chinese targets that were designed to collect intelligence on the COVID-19 crisis. The alleged targets were China's Ministry of Emergency Management and the Wuhan municipal government. To me, that seems like a lot of balls on behalf of Vietnam. The article continues. It says, in sum, human and signals intelligence sources likely confirmed the first rumors of the emergence and spread of COVID-19 to Vietnamese intelligence collectors. A report by FireEye alleges the first Vietnamese cyber intrusion to gather information on COVID-19 was initiated against China's Ministry of Emergency Management and the Wuhan city government on January 6th of 2020 and continued throughout the first quarter of the year. China's lack of transparency likely was an important motivating factor behind this decision. Mike Fitzpatrick, this seems like a lot of balls on behalf of Vietnam. Do we know much of anything about hackers from Vietnam? They're the last, if that's the last country I think of when I think of hacking, and especially hacking into China. That's ballsy.
As I said, right? I mean, it is a unique breed that does that kind of work and that kind of activity. Is it ballsy? Absolutely. The thing about cyber attacks is that it can be done in a number of different ways. I mean, we know today that 92% of all breaches now start with a phishing attack. Email, a link in it. Somebody clicks on it. 30% of the time, the link is clicked. I've seen this in our own studies, in our own data, in our own reports with clients. So we see that, like I said, 91% of all breaches now start with a phishing attack. Phishing has increased. In 2017, it increased by 260%. 2018, it was by 630%. Last year, it was over, it was over 280%. So we've seen nearly 1,000% increase in phishing attacks in the last 3 years. We've got a huge number, and I'm looking for it right now as we speak, a huge number of attacks. Bear with me just a second. Let me find this particular slide. But just a huge number of attacks that IT departments and companies have to deal with year in, year out. And
I'll tell you what, while you look for that,
go ahead.
I found another article that this was from Forbes magazine. It says the White House estimates technology theft and other unfair business practices originating from China are costing the American economy more than $57 billion a year. Last year, a U.S. Department of Justice report to the Senate Intelligence Committee claimed that from 2011 to 2018, more than 90% of the cases alleging economic espionage by or to benefit a state involve China, and more than 2/3 of the department's theft of trade secrets have a nexus to China. That's pretty ballsy. But then the article goes on to say this: a significant proportion of those thefts traced back to the Chinese government, and if they didn't, they always benefited the Chinese government's economic policies. Imagine that. The investigation now suggests those thefts are often enabled by the... Sit down, folks. I hope you're sitting down. The investigations suggest those thefts are often enabled by the hacked companies themselves. This is a quote. In dozens of interviews with U.S. government and business representatives, officials involved in commerce with China said hacking and theft were an open secret for almost 2 decades, allowed to quietly continue because U.S. companies had too much money at stake to make waves. That is staggering. Absolutely staggering.
And BZ, we know that by the end of 2020, cybercrime in and of itself is supposed to have an annual take of over $6 trillion a year. I mean, we're not talking drug cartel money. We're talking more. than drug cartel money. So information, knowledge, it's all valuable. This is a study based upon real-time data that SonicWall did, and this is out of their cybersecurity center, and this is from a presentation last year at the Ponemon Institute that Bill Connor, the CEO of SonicWall, did. This is from a presentation that he did for President Trump the week before. So out of their SonicWall customer-facing side of their firewalls, this is what the average SonicWall customer faces in 2018 from an attack standpoint. Now, keep in mind, SonicWalls are typically deployed in small and mid-sized businesses. So this is that Fortune 5 million, as I call them. But so it's 25,000 malware attacks each year, 490 ransomware attacks each year. 19% of malware are using non-standard ports, so they're coming in through SSL or other side channel types of attacks. 9.3 million intrusion attempts. This is what the average customer faces each year. 1,276 encrypted threats, encrypted messages, links, whatever it might be. 105,000 web application attacks. Again, this is what the average individual customer or business faces from a cybersecurity standpoint each year. Almost 5,500 phishing attacks each year. 392,000 new attack variants, 1,074 different new variants every day. This is the war in my world.
It's funny that you should use that word, war. Mike Fitzpatrick. Folks, I'm talking to Mike Fitzpatrick, who is founder and CEO of the NCX Group, a cybersecurity firm that handles security for all sorts of businesses here in the United States. So, Mike, it's from all of this and all that surrounds our current Wuhan 19 mess that led me to scream and to conclude that, you know what, China is our enemy. Moreover, now China is the enemy of the planet. So it was first thought the Wuhan 19 originated in that wet market in the city of Wuhan. So
that's
now
the narrative.
Yeah. So now we got information, most recent information, to indicate that is patently false. That the virus somehow escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, escaped the lab, that perhaps a lab tech went to that wet market, and that's where we're off to the races. Here's something really interesting, Mike Fitzpatrick, and people, listen to this. Doing show prep again tonight for this show with Mike. So I go into my favorite search engine. No, specifically I went into Google, okay? So I ran virus came from Wuhan lab. I ran that through Google. That's exactly what I typed in there. And what did I get? Not one hit from articles indicating that the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So I went to Firefox, and folks who don't know what Firefox is, that's another search engine, and got all the hits that I didn't get from Google. So I got article after article after article on Google about China claiming that was propaganda, that China had nothing to do with the release. They're innocent, nothing but pablum and articles from Chinese sources indicating that they're completely innocent. They're innocent as the driven snow. So with all that you've seen and heard, Mike Fitzpatrick, do you have any ideas or thoughts about where the Wuhan 19 originated? And how do you see China's involvement in all of this narrative? And, oh, yes, you and I have been talking about this for 2 or 3 months now. Okay,
so a couple of things. One, if the audience would go search Event 201. Event 201 on YouTube, you can find it there. They've got about 10 hours of video, I think it is. this is a red team pandemic exercise that took place at the end of October, 1st of November, 2019. The organizations that led the event, this pandemic tabletop exercise, were the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins University, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Isn't that odd how the players all seem to be the same? Huh.
So if you watch the video, and they got a highlight video, and in the highlight video, it talks about in this pandemic, again, end of October, early November timeframe of 2019. Timelines are important. So 2019, October 2019, early November 2019, the game is set with a pandemic that originated as a coronavirus that attacks the respiratory system, that originated out of a farmer's market where pigs are slaughtered, and spreads around the world quickly. One of the elements, and oh, by the way, it causes what is acute respiratory distress syndrome, is what coronavirus, what COVID-19 is, how it is killing people. It is massive systems failure that takes place, and a lot of it has to do with that acute respiratory distress syndrome. So again, I don't believe in coincidence, but so you have this in early November. The Wuhan virus, the original case, patient 0, seems to be whether it was intentionally released, accidentally released, where it was released, seems to be in mid-November of 19. Not December. It's earlier in November by most accounts now.
Right.
So you start to look at these data points. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in Event 201, DZ, is they talk about social media's platform. And this is coming from the NBC person at the table. She went on to say that it's time for social media to drop the pretense of being a platform and become a broadcaster and help shape the narrative. What we're seeing on all social media platforms right now is anything that doesn't agree with WHO or CDC is being removed. Period. End of sentence. They talk about flooding the audience, flooding the narrative, all of that in the video. Watch the video, make up your own mind. Again, this is not conspiracy. This event actually happened, and these are their actual comments.
It's funny you should mention that, because my second hour, depending on how long we go here, there were two doctors that were talking about new information that they revealed regarding updated statistics and the lethality and the lesser lethality, although the greater virulence of Wuhan 19. And because of that, and they worked, these are doctors, these are not, a guy sitting in a darkened studio like me. Two doctors discussing statistics and facts. And YouTube today removed that video and said it did not conform to their community standards. I'll talk about this later if I get the time. I hope I will. The CEO, the female CEO of YouTube, said that if it is specifically just like you said, Mike Fitzpatrick, if this is not congruent with the WHO, we are pulling this shit off YouTube, and they did. YouTube will brook no discussion or suggestion whatsoever of anything that goes against the World Health Organization. So just what you said is accurate.
It's in the playbook.
It's staggering. It's absolutely staggering.
At some point in time, we have to, and there's a tendency, and I remember when I first read through UN Agenda 21 when I was a planning commissioner, and reading that, and going, they really can't mean these things. At some point in time, a lot of people have to understand, and I know your audience probably gets this, and that is they really do mean the things that they say. Everything that's going on is in that pandemic plan from the Gates Foundation in that event, 201. So I highly recommend that people do their own research. Don't take my word for it. View it yourself and come to your own conclusions. Critically think and come to your own conclusion.
Now I'm trying to monitor two chat rooms right now. I'm looking at the Facebook chat room, and hey, in the Facebook chat room, thanks to Jamie and Carl, Janie and Carl, who are in the chat room. Thanks for being there. And in the SHR Media chat room, thanks to Alaskan and Simone and Kaiser for being there. I greatly appreciate it. So we have information indicating China was aware the virus escape sometime in late 2019. As you indicated, it was October, November, right around in there. Then we see a clear indication of what I call consciousness of guilt. When China locks down the entire city of Wuhan, a population of 11 million people, won't allow flights to or from Wuhan inside China, but allows international flights from Wuhan to go free. To me, that shows a clear intent to disseminate the virus worldwide. And so simultaneously, China vacuums up, they hoover up all the worldwide supply of PPE, personal protective equipment. Over 11 billion units. China sits on it and then doesn't mind selling it back to those around the globe who need it at massively inflated prices. So to me, Mike Fitzpatrick, that means they knew exactly what they were doing, knew precisely the virus had escaped, and knew with that prior knowledge that if they cornered the PPE market, which they did, they could make a financial killing, so to speak. So 50-cent masks were sold for up to $8 each by China. So China, how can you conclude that China is not our enemy? And the American media maggots and the leftists and the Democrats are doing their work. They're sharing their propaganda, just like YouTube, just like social media, just like Facebook, Google, etc. China is the enemy of the entire planet, folks, for unleashing this hell upon the earth. I said before, and I'll say it again until I cack, China needs to be destroyed economically. The United States needs to become more populous, more independent than ever. Again, this situation underlines and buttresses the necessity for our bringing industry, manufacturing, back from China and onto U.S. soil. We can't have our medications made there anymore. We can't have our antibiotics made there anymore. We can ill afford to have anything of the least bit criticality manufactured there, except like trinkets or keychains or kitsch or useless crap, the likes of which they excel. So a question for you, sir, Mike Fitzpatrick. Did China, in a roundabout way, unleash a form of terrorism, not only on the United States, but upon the planet as well? I could make an argument, I submit. Hasn't China actually committed one of, if not the single largest crime against all of humanity? I think I could argue that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of countries now making demands of China. A lot of what I'm paying attention to, again, from the business continuity side, we do, like as I said, cybersecurity, business continuity, incident response. So we're spending a lot of time tracking what's going on globally. There's 4 or 5 doctors that I follow on YouTube and listen to daily. One doctor out of the UK, Dr. Campbell, I think it is, gives a great perspective as far as what is going on globally with the cases and all of this. But, the UK is filing a lawsuit basically and a demand for damages against China. I believe Italy is too. Several other countries are. It sounds as though President Trump may be considering some of the same action. So it's going to be interesting to see how it is going to play out. The thing that we keep hearing about now is a second wave, right? That's now the part of the talking point,
right?
As far as what to expect, second wave during the fall and all this. So again, we're watching globally. So one of China's best trading partners is Australia because of proximity.
Okay.
Do you know that 2 days ago, and Australia's moving into winter now. They're starting to move into winter. Fall, it's headed into winter. They had a total of 8 cases the other day. 8. Nationwide, 8.
Well, the other thing that I remember about Australia is when this came to their light, and make no mistake, folks, because I've had people on the show. Jack Alexander is a great fan of the show. He lives in Australia. I talk to him a lot. And I had somebody call from New Zealand. Both people indicate that New Zealand and Australia are leftist-oriented governments. Yet Australia, one of the first things that they did is stop everything. Everything at the border, all the flights, period, end of statement. Early. Now, arguing about whether we could or should have done that is an argument for another day. But Australia wrested control of its country and immediately exerted control, and they pissed China off big time. So is that a measure? Is that the reason for a measure of their success? Single digit deaths.
Yeah, death-wise, and I was just looking for it. I saw the latest update yesterday, and I want to say the total death count for all of Australia is like 69 or 70 deaths. It's here it is. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, 89 deaths total for the entire nation.
Amazing that they can pull it off. Absolutely amazing.
New Zealand, and again, I'm using the tool from Johns Hopkins. They have had 1,400 confirmed cases and 19 deaths total. So again, they're not seeing an increase right now. It's level, it's peaked out, and they're not seeing the increase or this quote unquote second wave at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see how New Zealand and Australia fare with this.
In a moment, we're going to talk about freedoms and liberties and liberties removed. Folks, we're talking to Mike Fitzpatrick, who is the founder and CEO of NCX Group. He is a cybersecurity expert. He's a great interview, a great guy. One of his favorite bands is Styx, so we have that in common as well. So, is this a form of war? You mentioned it before, Mike Fitzpatrick. Should we look at the spreading of Wuhan 19 with knowledge and purpose by China as war?
You know, it is a really good question. I mean, one of the pieces of information that I've seen talks about a couple of Chinese generals that actually wrote a book in, 99 or 2000, on using an all-out approach of war to weaken the United States, because they surmised that China would not be able to go toe-to-toe with the U.S. military, so there needed to be a way to level the field. And so I found that interesting. That's in an Epoch Times report video that came out, documentary that came out probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I want to say.
Then there's this aspect, too. We could say this. I could make an argument for this, and I'd like your opinion on this, Mike Fitzpatrick. Hasn't China essentially, digitally, at least via hacking, haven't they essentially declared war on the United States for years?
Well, I think using that as a measuring stick, you'd have to do the same with with some other, fairly, interesting suspects, right? Russia, Ukraine, Iran, North Korea. There's attacks out of our friends too. So it's interesting by what you use to measure such attacks. There's a great book, BZ, and I think you would love this. We listened to it. I'm a big audiobooks guy. And there's an audiobook out there called Sandworm. And Sandworm is related to a particular type of malware that originated in the Ukraine. There are so many cybersecurity elements tied to Ukraine, and quite frankly, in a lot of ways, a lot of countries experiment with infrastructure attacks on the Ukraine, of all places. This book actually gets into some of the details of those attacks and what is done, where they originated from. You start to connect dots back into the whole Ukraine-Russia probe and some of the attacks that came out of that, some of the relationships with CrowdStrike, their CTO, and the Ukrainian government. It's a fascinating read. And so if you're looking for something that is, again, real, is well documented in this particular type of book on cybersecurity, it is a fascinating read.
Okay, and what's it called again?
Sandworm.
Sandworm, okay.
Yeah, the hackers, when they built it, they wanted to name it after something so they could claim it. And the group that built it was a huge fan of the old Dune book and movie.
Right. I was just going to say that's where it came from. That's the name of the sandworms created spice. The spice must flow. Right. So if you're in chat over at SHR, I just put the link to the book there in chat. If anybody, mostly as a reminder for me, so that at the conclusion of the show I can go get the book. Mike Fitzpatrick, we are both big believers in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We are, and we've chatted about this, we are watching freedoms, in my opinion, unnecessarily given away by what may be, and I think I'm being lenient, what may be well-meaning Americans, but they're frightened and or ill-informed Americans. So I know what's been happening up here. You're in Southern California, so let me ask you, Mike Fitzpatrick, what have you been seeing with your own eyes in SoCal in terms of freedoms removed from the citizenry? And how is that being received, and are people pushing back on that?
Well, in the area in which I live is fairly conservative, but, we've seen our fairly conservative politicians go along with whatever this unelected public health official states as policy going forward. One of the things I found that I find incredibly interesting is the fact that the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, has not filed one case against any of the state, county, federal governments for violating everybody's civil rights. The Constitution doesn't have an exclusionary clause. In case of a pandemic, you lose your rights.
Yeah, there was a
that
meme.
Doesn't exist.
There was a meme flying around on that. But it's true. It's absolutely true.
From a constitutional standpoint, DZ, the governor that I think has handled this the absolute best is Governor Noem in South Dakota or North Dakota. She basically didn't put any restrictions on anybody. She said, here's the CDC guidelines. You're adults. You're free people. Figure it out.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention that because I watched her on either Tucker Carlson's show tonight. Might have been Tucker Carlson. Yeah, and she's from South Dakota. That's exactly it. Treat people like adults. And oddly enough, primarily they'll respond like adults. Mike Fitzpatrick, we're, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to remind people of this because I'm not going to do the full commercial thing. I just want to remind people of this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we are talking to Mike Fitzpatrick, who is the founder and CEO of NCX Group. He is a cybersecurity expert, and we're talking about basically everything cybersecurity and everything Wuhan. Mike Fitzpatrick, are you concerned like I am that the goal keeps getting moved? The goal line keeps getting moved. The statistics appear to be changing all the time. The stats, and the reason this is important is these are the stats upon which people are locked up in their homes while we shutter businesses. We keep people off of beaches and we keep people out of parks. And yet we find what the leftist's demigod, Anthony Fauci, says, whatever he says is law. It's the rule. You know what I'd love to do? Mike Fitzgerald, wouldn't you love to go into and discover, just do a forensic digital analysis of Dr. Fauci's fiscals and his financials? I'd love to find who's paying him.
I'll leave that up to my friends at the FBI that have the appropriate warrant. That has nothing to do with me.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. But it's just no. I'm not trying to pin you down with that. I'm just saying. I would love to find out on whose payroll this dude is. But what we're finding out is that... I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the things that I've heard from a number of different credible people is he's part of the board of advisors for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yes.
The other thing that a lot of people don't realize that aren't as gray in the beard as you and I, is that Fauci's been in charge of the NIH for 40 years. He goes back to the early days of AIDS, and apparently he was fundamentally wrong on a lot of the AIDS research and the approach. And I asked the question the other day. I mean, he promised a vaccine way back when for AIDS. So are we expected to shelter in place for the next 39 years while we wait for a vaccine? But then again, what good is the vaccine if this mutates?
No.
So there's a lot of issues, a lot of flawed thinking in this. You quarantine the sick, you don't quarantine the healthy. There's no basis for this in any laws anywhere. There's a very well-reasoned argument that somebody from the Dillon law firm made related to whether or not there was the authority to actually do this. Another good friend of mine, was one of the attorneys that were involved in Riverside County getting an opening for religious services, parking lot related, for Easter Sunday. They were actually involved in moving the county along from a legal standpoint to make that concession. So I've had a front row seat for some of this. But it is really interesting how our rights, our freedoms are coming secondary to some virus. And I'm amazed at how many people still don't speak up, are afraid to speak up, are just think that it's okay now. It floors me.
The information we're getting is that the Wuhan 19 virus is a lot more endemic than we thought. That many more people caught it, and by dint of that, its mortality is a lot less than we thought. What we're discovering is kids don't seem to be much affected. Young adults don't seem to be much affected. People in pretty good shape don't seem to be much affected. Yeah, it's apparently readily transmittable, but it's got a mortality rate of about 1%, give or take. How can we justify absolutely killing the once incredible economy of the United States for that? I have a theory. I think, and I want to hear your thoughts on this when I tell you. Why are Democrats pushing huge death stats? You got to stay inside. You got to go nowhere. You got to quiver on the floor in the fetal position. Why? Because with fear, you are easier to dupe. You are more malleable. You are more willing to ignore or embrace naked power grabs by leftists and Democrats. And it's all about power and control and money. Power and control and money. In my opinion, that's why.
I don't disagree. I made the analogy to friends, and maybe you saw it in one of my posts recently, that if this was a movie, and this movie was Star Wars, the last 10 years have been the New Hope, the beginning of the Rebel Alliance, the discovery of Luke, and, we're starting to gain freedoms back. Now, we're actually into the second movie, The Empire Strikes Back, is what we're experiencing now. You've got the rise of the Sith Lord and Darth Vader and the Death Star and all this other stuff that is rolling our way at this point. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, is it Return of the Jedi or is it Hunger Games at the end of this?
Here's an area that really disturbs me. And I hope this comes back to bite him on the butt. Big time. The weakest population exists in our nursing homes. I am so glad that my dad was in a nursing home for a while. He was able to go back home. He passed away in 2009. I have been in nursing homes. I have seen the conditions. I know what they're like. I get it. The weakest population exists right there in our nursing homes and our care facilities. So we already know, New York already knows, 25% of Wuhan 19 deaths in New York City and New York are in nursing homes. And so New York Governor Andrew Cuomo mandates that nursing facilities take Wuhan 19 patients. Yeah. Okay, that's a great combination. Facilities that are without a doubt the least equipped and staffed to take on that burden with the most vulnerable segment of society. 2 days ago, the New York Post wrote this article. Here's the headline. Cuomo doubles down on ordering nursing homes to admit coronavirus patients. To which I would say, hashtag, what the fuck are you thinking? Let's kill more people, comma, you ignorant shithead. Sorry for being a little upset. So he doubles down. This is from the article. Governor Cuomo doubles down on Sunday, this past Sunday, on the state's controversial directive ordering nursing homes to admit COVID-19 patients. He doesn't say, maybe that wasn't the greatest idea to put the most vulnerable in our society with a deadly, raging pandemic virus. No, he decides that No, I don't think I really made a mistake. As a matter of fact, I think it was a damn good idea. I've gone over, I know, folks, before I must remember my manners. Mike Fitzpatrick, can you hang around a little bit longer?
I thought we would probably go 2 hours tonight, so I'm good.
All right.
So.
Okay, great. Okay, boom. I'll take that. I'll take that as a yes. Here's an article I found about some people in New York. And I want to read this to you, comma. Thanks, Governor Cuomo. The first sentence is, I am heartbroken about what has been happening to my 95-year-old mother in a Long Island, New York nursing home. She was admitted to a rehab nursing facility after breaking her hip on Mother's Day of 2019. She was in rehab for 100 days, then admitted as a nursing home resident at the same facility. She has PAD, peripheral artery disease, and has venous stents implanted in her right leg to increase blood flow to her feet. 6 weeks ago, she was supposed to have another venous stent procedure in her left leg, but was denied the procedure due to the COVID-19 outbreak and Governor Cuomo's misguided policy of placing a moratorium on elective procedures. Since when is any medical procedure elective on a frail 95-year-old woman? Her wound nurse at the nursing home was keeping an eye on her condition, but after 5 weeks of waiting, her feet turned gangrenous. And the local area hospital could not guarantee that she would not contract the COVID virus at their hospital where she would be having the stent procedure done. They also couldn't guarantee the procedure would effectively reverse the damage to her feet that was already done by her being essentially placed on ignore mode. On top of this, her vascular MD did not return any phone calls and multiple messages left for him. Folks, imagine this is your mom. Facing all these obstacles, my incredibly brave mother decided to stay at the nursing home and say her goodbyes to her family and friends. She made her own decision on April 20th, 2020, based on the information provided to stay at the nursing home and not have the surgery. 3 days later, on April 23rd, she was tested and found positive for COVID-19. How is it possible for a woman who has been confined to her room for the past 6 weeks and not allowed any visitors able to contract COVID? She's a 95-year-old woman, folks. She's now on heavy medications and oxygen, waiting to die from sepsis. I pray every day that she is without pain until her passing. A note about her caregivers. My mom and my late dad have stayed at this rehab nursing home over the past 4 years. Our family is well known to the admin and nursing staff there. They have on most occasions been responsive to our family's requests and generally have provided a good care to my parents. For this, I am grateful. As far as what has recently transpired and the tragic results for my mom, I am without words to adequately describe my disappointment and anguish. I realize these are unique times in which we find ourselves, but losing a dear and devoted parent this way is inexcusable and beyond anything I could ever have imagined. I will search my heart for the forgiveness needed to move forward, and I pray for the health of both residents and care workers there at the nursing home. May God have mercy on us all. Thanks, Governor Cuomo. Good move. You fucker.
BZ, this is your mom?
No. This is a mother. She's not even named. This is a mother who is she's in Long Island, she's in New York, and she's suffering at the hands of the decisions made by Cuomo.
You know, it's interesting. A little over a year ago now, February 1st, 2019, I lost my mom. She was battling lung cancer, bone cancer. At the end, was in a nursing home. And I actually, in talking to my wife earlier, as much as I hate having lost my mom, she was everything to me. I'm so glad that I don't have to worry about her this year.
You wouldn't want her to go through this.
No, but I mean, here's the thing. She was back in Texas. I'm here. I wouldn't even be able to travel to get back to see her like I did last year. And because of that, I'm absolutely grateful that the Lord had the wisdom to take her home then and not now. It wasn't a question of if, it was when, because Mom kicked cancer's ass 5 times. She's the only person on the cancer roll to actually survive acute leukemia after age 50. She kicked cancer's ass 5 times. This was the 6th. And the only reason she didn't win this time is because of the fact she decided she was tired and she was ready to go.
My dad my dad in 2009 knew when he was ready. That's a story for another day. I'm looking at the comments on Facebook. Janie Reed Lane wrote on Facebook in the comments section, crimes against humanity.
Yep.
That's exactly that. That edict is killing people, older people, the weakest of all. But the overarching aspect of it all is that China is responsible.
Yeah, but you also have to look at what role does the Gates Foundation, because, Bill is all about vaccines. He's all about, it's in his TED Talks. You can go watch these.
Oh, God, yes. Yes.
He talks about, in one particular TED Talk from 2010, I think it is, that, climate change and getting down to zero emissions and that kind of thing would take massive changes in population. And he goes on to state that with the right health care and vaccine, we can reduce global population by 10 to 15%. At some point in time, we have to start taking these globalists that are involved in these big initiatives at their word for what they say and not dismiss it.
I can't go up this far in the Facebook chat, but in Facebook chat, there was another individual who said Georgia Guidestones.
Yes.
And first I said Guidestones. And then she said Georgia Guidestones. And I went, oh, right.
Yeah, 500,000 population, too many eaters. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. These are the leftists, the Democrats, ably supported and abetted by the American media maggots who want you dead. Isn't it convenient that most of the people who are dying because of this are going to be older people because they just need to die? Oh, that's right. Ezekiel Emanuel already says that people should die at 75 because they're just not worth hanging around anymore. He said he'd say, hey, I should go at 75. I'm not productive anymore. This is how we treat people?
Well, even that guy in his complete life system, it's from age 14 to 45 are the productive years. Anybody outside of that is not useful to society. He's written this. He's a big, he was highly influenced. Zeke Emanuel was highly influenced by Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. Go back and reread Brave New World with your older eyes rather than the high school eyes that you might have read it with way back when, as I did.
That's funny. Last week, another guest on the show said the exact same thing. Go back and read Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. It says exactly that. Insightful, Mike Fitzpatrick. Folks, if you just came in, and I've had a couple of people that have just come in on Facebook. If you're curious, I'm speaking to Mike Fitzpatrick. He is a cybersecurity expert and turning out to be a pretty good friend of mine. And Mike, again, I thank you for being here. He's founder and CEO of the NCX Group, a cybersecurity firm that makes sure that you are secure. And we were talking initially about hacking in the first hour. The second, we're talking about the Wuhan 19 and how it's going to be affecting things and our loss of freedoms and responsibilities. This is all, in my opinion, an example of government insanity and overreach. The edict is killing the most easily killed. So, Mike Fitzpatrick, I know this is a huge, really open-ended question, but I bet you have at least one thought on this. When all of this is over, or as over as it's going to be, because no one knows, or at least kind of subsides to a low rumble, what do you think our nation is going to look like? Oh, God, how do I phrase this? We got an election November 3rd, folks. Who wins? This is for all the marbles. Do we go globalist? Or do we take care of our own and take care of our nation? That's what the threshold is. What will our nation look like, do you think, Mike Fitzpatrick?
You know, it's going to be interesting, and I hate using that word all the time, but we're living through history. And I want to say that probably around the 15th of March, 16th of March, I actually started keeping a journal of things because we are literally living through history. And if you haven't started doing that, you should do it so you can save it for your kids. I think back to the times when I was younger and we would go out to dinner as a family with my grandparents. Who, my grandfather was born in 1898. My grandmother was born in 1903. They both lived through the Great Depression. My grandmother, up until the time she passed in the late 90s, she lived in 96, I guess it was, would take all the sugar packets and jam packets from the tables of the restaurants where we would go and stick them in her purse.
Yeah.
And that's directly attributed to the time through the Great Depression that she endured.
That's a greatest generation thing. Quick story about my dad. He was from the greatest generation. He flew B-17s for the 8th Air Force over Europe. Came back, obviously, or I wouldn't be talking to you today. But he was the dude that you'd go into his shower, and did he ever throw a sliver of soap away? No, he'd attach it to another piece of soap and use every bit of soap. He was the guy who would hover over you, not far away, but you knew he was watching you if you left the water running when you're brushing your teeth. That's the guy that lived through the Great Depression. So, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And you think, and we've talked about this, I'm a huge history buff. I love history, and I love the truth of history. I don't like the way it's manipulated and I love what Glenn Beck says, and that is truth has no agenda. The truth is just the truth. If you go back to the 1918 pandemic, that killed, what was it?
Millions.
Millions people? Yeah. This thing left us in an incredible depression, far worse than the Great Depression. Massively worse. We were out of that depression in 2 years' time, thanks to Calvin Coolidge's policies of hands-off, zero regulation, and cutting spending. it gave us the roaring 20s. The Great Depression wasn't caused by a stock market crash. It was literally caused by a hurricane in 1926 in Miami that killed the housing market in Florida. No one wanted to move to Florida anymore because of hurricanes. Fear is an incredible motivator. Fear and pain are the world's two biggest motivators with humans. And so you look at these things. I mean, the Great Depression was actually prolonged by FDR and his policies.
Yes. Thank God you said that. I, too, am a student of history, and we found that out in 2008, didn't we, when we gave money to banks that were said too big to fail, and it took them a long time to come back. Most paid the money back, but I said then, and I'll say now, let them fail.
But I look at my son. My son is 20. In his 20 years on this planet, we've been through 9/11, and so security changed, and our loss of rights there in travel and those kinds of things for the sake of security changed. We then had the collapse, the financial collapse. And I remember in our area at the time, we were number one in the country in foreclosures in my area. I played Santa. We do a thing here in town where it's a Santa run. And because of where we're located, we're 45 miles from anywhere, from a mall at one point. And so historically, what the city has done is they've loaded Santa on a fire truck, and he literally goes from street to street, neighborhood to neighborhood in the city, so the kids could go tell Santa what they wanted for Christmas. And I've had the opportunity to play Santa and be Santa for kids on that Santa run probably 5 or 6 years. The last year I did it was in 2010. I had kids ask Santa for a job for their mom or their dad. I had kids ask me get their dad home or their mom home from Afghanistan or Iraq. I would, Santa, can you find a job for my parents? Santa, can you save my house? It was the most miserable night ever. And these kids that should not be worried about those things were absolutely consumed with trying to do what they could for their parents. And you look at what this Gen Z has lived through already, and now a global pandemic. It is amazing what these kids have lived through. My son said it the other day. He says, you know that story you guys would tell me, snow both ways, uphill, school, the whole bit, even though California for mom. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah. He says, I'll be able to tell my kids I lived through a pandemic. What's your excuse? So
it's true.
It's kind of funny from that perspective, but what we've all been through in 20 years' time is just an amazing upheaval. And you look at how resilient we are and how we're able to come back. I think that if businesses are able to get open again, I think that, and as soon as possible, I think it will save some families. I think it will save the catastrophe from being worse than it's going to be. Yahoo is already, there's 5.7 million businesses here in the U.S. with less than 100 employees. By far, the number one segment for business in this country that employs more people than anybody else is small business. Small business,
exactly. Hey,
small business. Go ahead,
Mike Fitzpatrick. We got a caller on the line. I think it's Kaiser. Kaiser, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Outstanding. Hey, Mike. I'm also a security professional. I just do it live on both feet. I've been doing this since Oh, shoot, the Gulf War and before the Cold War.
Very cool.
Here's my thing. I get you, but there are certain things that I think need to be brought to bear. I've typed to BZ. First off, the Vietnam Quiet War with China. You know about that.
Mm-hmm.
Both near and far east. That's my bailiwick. That's where I work normally. Mostly Near East nowadays, after the Cold War. Anyways, what I want to ask you is, that there's a reason why Vietnam had a low death rate. Their borders were closed. Korea, I think, North Korea being, there's a reason why I think Kim Jong-un is probably in a vegetative state without saying too much. Probably dead. You know that. But this cyber war that's going on, nobody wants to talk about because it doesn't make the Democrats look good. And this is weaponized biowarfare. You know this, and so do I, without pulling any punches. Everybody I know in the government who I used to work for, both in law enforcement and intelligence before that, this thing is out of hand, and I do believe it's to destabilize the West. And your thoughts on that is something I would really like to hear. This is purposeful. This is malice forethought. Your thoughts?
Kaiser, I don't disagree with you, but, because of the position I'm in, I'm not going to come out and actually say that without absolute proof. I have my speculation. There's a lot of us on this side of the world that have our opinions that are similar to yours. It's one of these things where it is difficult to say. I spend most of my day exercising caution with clients, helping them understand what they need to do in dealing with the fallout of this. We don't do any work really in the public sector. Part of that is choice. Because of some of the strings that come along with that, and you know what I mean. So, my perspective in some respects is that of a very interested bystander. I
get what you're saying, but I'm saying, I guess I get what you're saying, but in reality, I'm not saying it's. Here's what I'm not saying, and you will understand this. It was formed in a lab. Nobody can doubt that.
Right.
Well, what the problem is how it got distributed. It got distributed by no internal flights in China at all. But here's my synopsis, and it's mine. It's not yours. So everybody can take from it what they want. It was allowed to go international because China realized, and this is right after, remember, this is all queered up, and I know that's a weird word, but you know what I mean. It was all queered up because Trump had just trounced them on that sweet deal, the free trade deal that he squashed. And the election. I think there was domestic people who were complicit, which will be found out. Whether anybody will be punished, it's the U.S. government, corrupt as hell. But I do believe that by malice of forethought, the Chinese knew Wuhan was infected and allowed how many million people to fly out. And you know how many it was, and so do I.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's all documented. I mean, the EU, with Trump's action in shutting down flights out of Wuhan and out of China to the U.S., saved the West Coast. This could have been far worse on the West Coast and very similar to what we see in New York. But because the EU did not shut down flights from the EU to the U.S., and Trump could not get their buy-in, that's why we have the issues along the eastern seaboard that we do. The vast expanse of it in New York and other places that are key landing points for international flights. You can see the trail that you're talking about as I watch the maps and locations explode, originally in China, then moving to Iran, then to Italy, then to France and Germany, and then the UK. You started to see it really take off, and then New York. Once the shutdown of the UK started, you started to see it start to flatten out a little bit. But the real problem here was the EU not taking action. As far as the U.S. is concerned.
No, you're exactly right. And that's because of Angela Merkel, who has realized, and people don't understand the EU. You and I probably do a little more than most. The EU was Adolf Hitler's dream. And notice Merkel, she comes from East Germany. People, I always tell people this, and they fail to realize. They think she's a dummy, a puppet. No, she actually is a physicist. You know this and I do. I know it probably better than you do because I actually helped on Sea Island when she came over for the G8 summit on her team. I speak German. You may speak a few languages too. I also speak Arabic and a fake telemetry. The point is, at this point, this was purpose-built. And she's not going to be in Germany for much longer because she's just getting like Biden now. She's senile. So the next election cycle is going to be way different, brother. And you know what I'm talking about without saying it. And I think this was the last ditch to get Trump out of office. Your thoughts? And honestly, I'm open to them. And notice I haven't said you're wrong on anything. I really think you're hitting good points. The one point that I think you may have missed was the Vietnam aspect on the border war and how many miles of that border between Laos and Vietnam that war is extended and the sphere of influence Vietnam has in Southeast Asia. Your thoughts, brother?
Guys, let me throw this out. I want to throw out a couple of points to you, both of you. Folks, we're talking to Mike Fitzpatrick, who is founder and CEO of the NCX group. Not Grope, that's Biden's venue.
That's
NCX
Biden's company.
Yeah, and the NCX group. And luckily he's been here tonight, and I really appreciate Mike Fitzpatrick being here. Got Kaiser on the phone. Gents, 2 questions that I've been agonizing over the past couple of days or so. Some theories, some postulations. What would have happened, do you think, had this originated from the United States and somehow the same circumstances evolved that it got out by whatever means? We allowed people to leave the United States, but we locked up the United States tighter than a drum. How do you think the world would view the United States now? With this other question, second question, what if? What happens, what if someone discovers direct causal linkage evidence to indicate that China had the intent of allowing this out by way of a different means. They didn't mean to become self-infected, but they did mean to export it in some fashion. So, two questions bifurcated. First one is, what do you think would happen if the United States were responsible for doing this to the world? How would the rest of the world react to us? And the second question is, what if we find that China had intent?
First response is, what came to mind as you were asking the question if the shoe was on the other foot and the U.S. was responsible. The scene in Young Frankenstein with the townspeople storming the castle with torches and pitchforks came to mind. It would be that way. The second question, I don't know that I have an answer for that. It's so many wars now. I mean, it goes back to the change in economic policies back in the 60s. It used to be mutually assured destruction with nukes, and it's not. Mutually assured destruction now is through economic policy. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out and what happens with China as, U.S. manufacturing comes back to the U.S., because I think you are going to see that. I think that is absolutely critical for our well-being. One of the things I learned as a planning commissioner is that for every manufacturing job, it creates 4 other jobs outside of that company. Manufacturing is the key to economic prosperity, always has been. You have to make stuff in order to be secure, self-reliant, and be able to defend yourself. And that's the thing that a lot of people should have learned already through the last 8 weeks. And BZ, I don't know how many people actually have. I don't think that, there's a big swath of the country that hasn't necessarily grasped that.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. The guy that threw out all of this has impressed me has been Senator Tom Cotton, who started talking about China. He was talking about China first, and he was also one of the individuals that was saying early, we got to get medicines, we got to get antibiotics, we've got to get manufacturing out of China and back over here, and started submitting bills for that. God bless that dude.
And think globally, or think locally, and buy locally, fuck globally. And that's my basic language. What I'll say, I agree with you on the first portion. I will agree that this thing went out of hand, okay? If it was, as you stated your question, the American, well, we already know there's a Harvard professor and several others that have been arrested by the FBI because they were in cahoots with China, the COVID-19 thing, okay? And I like to call it the Wuhan 19. Because remember the woman that now tells YouTube and Facebook who to edit? She's an American. She's working in the Wuhan lab. Everybody wants to forget that. See, I'm a contractor now. Okay, Mike? So I can talk openly about knowledge. Okay? You may not because of NDAs. That's the freedom I have. Now, the other thing I'll say, you're exactly right, Mike. It is an economic war. And the problem that I see, and I want to hear your opinion on this because I value it, you've been spot on. BZ can tell you in all the chat, I haven't disagreed with you at all. This economic war, China knew if they called in debts, they just spent their load. Okay? They can't do anything after that, right? But by doing this and causing it to go global, when they're going to have a collapse, now it's a depression. How do you get out of a depression every fucking time? A war. This is proven fact. It's how the bankers clear their books. And that's the problem we're looking at on the next. We're going to have a depression. But what always happens after the depression? Hyperinflation. And that's why these toilet paper buyers, the panic people, trust me, I live in a small town in Ohio, my brother, and I work internationally, and I made it all the way to a certain country. I can't get into where I was going, and I made it to a certain point, and the other country stopped all entry of Americans. And yet in Ohio, for this month, we have 81 deaths out of 11,065,000. You understand that?
No, and
650,000 people.
Kaiser, the models have been absolutely horrid on this. I mean, the one model that I've been following was the one that the hospitals were using for logistics and logistics management, load management. That model was changed literally every 3 days and revised downward repeatedly to where it was an absolute joke. I've got a mathematician that I work with that's part of my team for different types of engagements, right? Where you need mathematicians to do certain mathematician things. And he went through and did his models. According to his models, based upon the original trajectory here in the U.S., because we literally went from, it was on a Thursday, we went from literally 746 cases to 2,000 cases in like 3 days. Now, part of that's driven by testing, obviously. The other part of that you have to look at is the number of deaths. And so in his model, this is a chaos theory type of mathematician. In his model, this week we should be at 4 million dead.
Yeah.
Completely wrong.
We're like, what, 30,000 out of a country of 330 million? Yeah, we're all in lockdown. I've said this before. This is like Contagion, the movie, not the Star Wars model. I liked what you said. I got what you meant totally. But the point is, this is more like Contagion. They're making it out to be something it's not. It's about control, and I'll tell you, you can disagree, and you don't have to speak on this. But I do believe this is the socialist playbook, communist playbook, actually. Remember, I cut my teeth at 17 on the Berlin Wall as a military policeman.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Has gotten out of control.
Kaiser and Mike, let me give you some stats. Here's an article. Mike Fitzpatrick is down in Southern California. Here's a USCLA study down in Mike's neck of the wood that says early results of antibody testing suggests, these are facts from tests. This is where it began to break down. Says the number of COVID-19 infections far exceeds the number of confirmed cases in Los Angeles County. USC and the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health released preliminary results from a collaborative scientific study that suggests infections from the new coronavirus are far more widespread, and thusly the fatality rate much lower in L.A. County than previously thought. Then there was another study that confirmed essentially the same thing, which indicates this thing is much more infectious and much more rampant than anyone thought. and then having blown through all sorts of populations, what they've determined is that the mortality rate has gone down, roughly, depending on which study you're talking about, to about 1%. Some people suggest as low as 0.05%.
Well, the doctors in Kern County that have been banned off of YouTube with their press conference from the other day put it at 0.00392 or something like that.
Yeah.
That's
mean,
exactly
really,
what they said. Yep.
Yeah, it was like a little over a quarter of 0.1% or whatever. The numbers are insanely wrong. And
exactly.
Again,
it's like Ohio. If you put the numbers in, and the numbers for Ohio for total population, and this is something I'm getting my National Guard brothers in on this thing. We have to talk to our reps and the governor, hopefully, DeWine. Here is the point. We have 11,650,000 people that live in Ohio. Yeah, we have 81 deaths, 2,100 admissions to hospital. Out of that, there's like 180 people on respirators, right? Or oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's essentially the population of Wuhan. 11 million is the population of Wuhan. And now people are saying that the estimates of the deaths in Wuhan, which people are also suggesting it's coming back to Wuhan, is 5 to 10 times what the Chinese are saying. That's also
some estimates as high as 50 times higher than what they're saying. But California, you've got a state of 40 million. We're shut down. And hopefully people don't take this the wrong way. But we have a total of 1,800 deaths attributed to this.
Exactly.
1,800.
It's dude, if you think about this, we have 0.000 and then add the percentage in there. This is how, and I'm going to use a word that I'm sure, I won't use it because we're on YouTube with BZ Show.
But it's late at night. Use anything you want.
It's retarded for us to change our way of life unless it's being done by design. And what I mean by that, Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Toledo, Democrat mayors, they're still going to keep it on lockdown even if the governor releases it. Under the Stafford Act is federal. You and I both know this. But the mayors can keep doing this. That's what New York City is going to do. We are now looking at a mutiny to undermine a sitting president because they couldn't get their way. We have a problem in the U.S., and nobody's looking at it. In California, I love you, BZ. You're a decent dude, Mike.
Oh, we're sick.
But California has a major issue.
We are sick.
Governor and
California administration is an infection by itself. I distilled it down to a bunch of questions, and nobody's been able to answer this. So I'm going to go through some of them. Because do we not notice, folks, when everybody said you shouldn't politicize this thing, the first thing the leftists, Democrats, and American media maggots did, what I call the LDAM, is they politicized it. So for the people who are boo-hooing and insisting that you get down under your desk in the fetal position and crying about the country, you got to remain shut down, I asked some questions, and the questions that I had for those people are these. Okay, so how many children should you starve in order to make you feel safe? How many families got to go bankrupt in order to make you feel safe? Specifically, give me a number. How many wives and children have to be stuck at home with an abusive husband or father or other family member to make you feel safe? Okay, so how many business owners, give me a number, should lose everything that they've worked for in order to make you feel safe? How many people are you comfortable with committing suicide? We already had a well-known nurse commit suicide the other day because of the stress from dealing with COVID-19 patients day in and day out. So, folks, give me a number. Leftists, Democrats, American media maggots, how many people are you specifically comfortable with committing suicide from hopelessness and the financial ruin that is going to happen if you keep this going? Give me an actual number.
Well,
don't dismiss the questions. Come up with people, with the number of people that you think should surrender their lives for your feelings and your safety. How many?
BZ, I will tell you this, and I'm sure Mike will say the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's the whole country. It's what was said by our founding fathers to sacrifice. It's Benjamin Franklin is who I'm talking about. Those who sacrifice safety or security and safety for their freedoms deserve neither. And so there is no number. But the communists know that, and then they try to pull on heartstrings. And Mike, this is your show, brother. I just came on because I respect what you're doing and what you're saying. And that's all I have to say.
Kaiser, I appreciate it, man. No, I'm taking it all in and listening, and it's interesting to hear a view from a different part of the country that's similar to what so many here in California that are trapped behind enemy lines in a lot of respects, are also saying. So it's good to hear. I don't think, and BZ, to your question, what does this look like when we're done? I don't think we're anywhere remotely close to done. I think the disruption in the supply chains and food supply chain. We're 8 weeks. There's still no toilet paper in the stores. How does that even happen?
Exactly. I went to the store today. Today is, it's tomorrow on the East Coast. So it's tomorrow for Kaiser. It's today for you and me. I went to the store today, a fairly well-known chain, and going to the store, and I put this up on social media, I looked at the aisle for the paper products, and this looked like the first day of the shutdown. There wasn't one roll of toilet paper or paper towels in 3 levels of racks for 50 feet, 50 feet, done, gone. So then I went to the detergent area, okay? Because maybe, I don't know, I was trying to figure out, why is this? I don't get this. In the detergent area where people wash their dishes, or they throw it in the washing machine, or maybe they throw it in their dishwasher. That place looked like it was like desert. It was a desert. It was gone. It was done. Okay, maybe people are washing dishes a lot more. But there was a run on that stuff. It's April 28th, and I can't get no toilet paper or paper towels. What the hell?
Well, I'll tell you this, and for both of you guys, I'll tell you this. On my side, I live in a town of 14,000. When I go to Kroger's every day, your Vons out there on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. Or Smith's if you're in Arizona or in different places. They change Kroger's names everywhere.
Yeah.
The point is, I'd go in there, and this is during the height of the toilet paper
debacle.
Freakout.
Yeah. Jesus.
Where there was a meme that went around that said, after the Wuhan virus, Wuhan 19 goes through America, after 300 million Americans die, the UN sends in teams and I've been to mass graves in Iraq. Okay, so it's not like I'm talking out of school. The point is, under inspection, they found one common trend. All the Americans had pristinely clean asses. That's the retardation. They die of starvation. Now, we have made this a self-fulfilling prophecy because how many meat-producing plants are going under? I hate to say this because it's going to cause a panic, which it shouldn't. Everybody just keeps shopping the way they do.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Instead, I know it's not. And honestly, this is going to go on for quite a while because it's the Depression era shit when people saved everything. Because
part
they don't realize you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, Kaiser, I'm going back to some of the things that my parents did as we were growing up in Kansas and in Texas. And that is, what happened to the days where you would buy a side of beef and stick it in your freezer and live off of that for 6 months? I'm sourcing that kind of purchase now.
Or have your own pig or your own chickens out in the backyard for eggs.
Yep.
And you buy the side of beef, you put that in your dude. Trust me, this is not even a blip in Kaiser's castle.
I want to see a cow in every yard in Sacramento. That's what I want to see. I want to see a cow in the yard of everybody in Sacramento.
Well, now here's the biggest problem. We're now going into depression. This is recycling. We're now seeing depression era shit. The same thing that happened. They're not selling the milk, so now we're going to have milk shortages. They're now butchering the Jersey cows that produce the milk, and all they're good for is hamburger. I mean, folks, if you don't understand what you're looking at a forced depression. And this is, I'm sorry about this, if you guys disagree, either of you disagree with me, we're good. I don't have a problem with you guys even disagreeing with me and any of your listeners. But when you're seeing milk cows slaughtered, their milk being flushed down the drain, when you see gas prices because of geopolitical things with Russia and Saudi Arabia deciding they were going to play chicken with us on getting gas prices down, but not to this point to where now you have on your coast and the East Coast tankers sitting off the coast.
Right, off the chemical coast.
Exactly.
So here's the bottom line. I'm going to have to wrap it up because I'm going to have to go. Here's the bottom line. Let me ask you, Mike Fitzpatrick, and you, Kaiser, this final question. Do we not have the ability to solve this situation ourselves right now? I say yes.
If we allow the American entrepreneur the freedom to actually create and seize opportunity and do what Calvin Coolidge did in 1918, 1920 that gave us the Roaring '20s, and you take the lid off and let this engine breathe again, I think we come back a lot faster than what anybody envisions. If the politicians, who a lot of them have never been in business on their own at any point in time, try to control it and throttle it and give us a governor of it, it will choke the life out of us for the next 10 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed.
I love it, Mike. you said exactly what I said. Open the fucking country up. You may not be able to say that. I can. I'm a contractor. And I will tell you, brother, open it up. Mike DeWine, President Trump, Gavin Newsom, of course, everybody forgets. What is Pelosi to them? I think it's an aunt or a cousin, whatever.
No, Nancy Pelosi is his aunt.
Yeah, and they forget she's a mafia princess from over there in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yep.
And I'm a Dago too, so I can talk about that Dago ass. She was a piece of ass. She's in a Chevrolet commercial and a picture. You guys can all find it. She was a hot piece of ass back in the day. She's now an incompetent piece of shit. And I'm telling you, you want to run this country like the mafia? Remember how Russia fell. After Russia fell, there was nothing but hatred towards the U.S. because there's an old saying in the Rodina in Russia. You treated us like a prostitute and shoved our face in the mud after you were done with us. And we did. We stole everything from them. I can't hate on them. I understand them. Same with the Muslims that I've worked with. I understand all of this stuff. But I am primarily an American. And I defend my country. And to watch it be subverted by communist Stasi tactics. This is when you have, please call in to tell us what's going on with this. And we got a whole line dedicated to this. Or take pictures and report it. Mm-hmm. My friend, we saw this under SJW shit. Anyways, love you guys. I'll hang up. I'll listen off the air. I want to hear you and BZ close this out.
All right.
I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to hijack it.
That's okay. Thanks, Kaiser. Appreciate it. Okay, Mike, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I was going to go in tonight, and I'm actually glad that it went this way. The second hour, I was going to play the video that was expunged from YouTube and go into that entire thing. Yes, it's been removed from YouTube, but I have another source. The whole thing is about 51 minutes. It's actually worth listening to. There are some things around that have about a 6 or 7 minute cut. That's not really what you should be listening to. You should be listening to the whole thing. I've got, by the way, folks, a programming note for Thursday night. In the first hour, I've got Ralph Chittum Sr. and Lonnie Poindexter, the two dudes from D.C., and they're going to be talking about the removal of freedoms in D.C., about D.C. Mayor Bowser and all the onerous things that have occurred in D.C. in the process of the removal of our freedoms. My other thing was, I was going to play that video tonight because I found another location. So it's not as gone as some people would think. And no, I'm not going to tell people where it is because otherwise that would give credence to have somebody else remove it from another platform. So Thursday night, I was going to do it tonight, and I'm glad that we had this great time to talk, Mike Fitzpatrick. But I'm going to play it Thursday night after Lonnie Poindexter and Ralph Chittum's. So, folks, if you want to hear the video that's been excised from YouTube, unless they get to this one too on another platform, I'm going to play it Thursday night in its entirety in the second hour. It's 51 minutes. And I submit, when you hear the whole thing as I did before YouTube removed it, you will understand in the globalist fashion why they did this.
You know, it is a great press conference by a couple of ER docs out of Kern County.
Yeah, these guys are not illiterate. It's not like this is somebody in front of a camera and they're just, they're pompously opining about something. No, these are two doctors who know what they're talking about.
And it will be eye-opening for a lot of people. BZ, there was a video that I sent you today related to a rancher out of Texas, talking about what's going on with cattle. I sent that out to a few friends. That video on Facebook has already been removed. It's no longer there.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. Now that you mention that, let me go down here. And because okay. You know what? Here's Mike. I'm looking at what you sent me. Folks,
yep.
Mike is completely correct. Here's the link from Facebook. And under the link where it customarily shows a photo and an image of the site, it says, attachment unavailable. So let me see what happens when I click that attachment. Here's what it says, folks. This is Facebook removing information from you. It says, sorry, this content isn't available right now. The link you followed may have expired. No, bullshit. Or the page may only be visible to an audience you're not in. Bullshit. It was removed. You're right, Mike. It's gone. So what was it? It was a guy with a ranch talking about cattle, saying the federal government wanted him to cull his herds.
Mm-hmm.
That is to say, kill his cattle. So essentially,
while he was also talking about cattle coming in from Africa.
Oh, he was talking about, that's correct, exactly. He was also talking about, and knowing full well that the federal government, maybe the USDA, wants beef from Namibia to be distributed throughout the United States. Isn't that wonderful? It gets more screwed up by the day. Mike?
Well, I mean, it's definitely going to be challenging times, BZ. It's definitely going to be challenging times, and people need to realize that what is in Event 201, the social platforms are all stepping up to control the message and the narrative now, and we're seeing it in real time. So the question is, how many people are actually paying attention to the events that are really going on?
That's a great question. Usually they're doing what either the government or the American media maggots tell them to do, because I think out of an abundance of, I would say Americans by and large are good people. That being said, Americans by and large are ignorant people.
I had a situation this afternoon where I had to answer a alarm at a building, and ended up in a conversation with a deputy sheriff. And it was interesting as we were kind of talking about events. There's somebody that we each know that is a deputy sheriff that passed away due to COVID recently, and we were talking about that. This particular deputy told me, he said, "Man, I'm not even watching the news anymore. I haven't watched the news in 3.5 weeks." If he's not paying attention to the news and what's being broadcast, because, as he said, it's just a controlled narrative. It's a controlled flow of information that's coming out. You got to wonder how many people at home are now starting to really question, because they have nothing else to do but start to question. How many people are waking up? How many people are realizing that, it may not be what you're being told it is? How many, red pill, blue pill matrix, right?
There's a scene, and I'll wrap up. First, let me ask you this. Mike Fitzpatrick, because of all the junk that's going on, would you consider coming back next month?
Sure, anytime.
Okay, outstanding. There's a final scene in the movie 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford and Cliff Robertson.
Love that movie.
Cliff Robertson is a member of the CIA, and Robert Redford is a guy that reads books. And in the process of reading books, he made a great discovery that the CIA didn't want him to know. So Robert Redford is about to leak everything to the New York Times. And Cliff Robertson is standing on the sidewalk in the winter looking at Robert Redford and said, "Do you know what you've done by that? Do you know what kind of disturbance you've just created? Do you know what will happen to this society that's known largesse for so many years? What do you think they'll do when they discover that they can't get oil anymore? What do you think they'll do when they discover they can't get food anymore?" And it applied during that time in the 70s when that was filmed, and it applies now. We haven't gotten into the danger area yet. Because as Cliff Robertson said in his final line, what do you think people are going to do when they can't get those things? And the answer is, they're going to want us to get it at all costs. And if we don't get it, and if the American public doesn't get it, because this is not a public that's prepared for a depression. These are pampered princesses and princes. That's been their entire lives for decades. The greatest generation is predominantly gone. They're gone. People who lived through the Vietnam War, they're dying. The Korean War, they're almost entirely expired. We don't have generations of people who have suffered. They don't know what suffering is. I can't say I do. I know what my dad told me. So what's a nation going to do when it wants and it can't get? I'll let you make that conclusion. Mike Fitzpatrick, thanks for being here tonight. I greatly appreciate it, sir.
BZ, always a pleasure, brother. I appreciate the time and getting a chance to talk to your audience. One last thing, if you have just a quick minute. It's interesting. I had a conversation with a friend because everybody's gone Zoom crazy with meetings and virtual meetings. The thing that is interesting to me, and again, based upon some of the stuff that he's doing within certain facets of encryption and technology, the subject of Zoom came up.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Zoom is a U.S.-based company, but all of its development is in China.
Yeah. Okay.
To reduce Zoom costs.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes.
So Zoom is the vast amount of their development, their software development, their platform development is in China. One of the things that we do know from a technology standpoint and technology that is in China, the Chinese government, the CCP, always asks for access. What a Trojan horse that would be to be able to follow any meeting.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, it's just like Huawei. What about 5G? Isn't that the perfect Trojan horse? Oh, hell yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we live in interesting times. And as I said, we're living in historic times.
We'd better be thinking like that from now on. We'd better be thinking about our vulnerabilities. Globalism can go to hell. It's not going to keep us safe.
not good for us.
It's going to build a bigger-ass power base in Brussels, Belgium. But it won't do anything here in the United States, not for us. And we were on the cusp of truly becoming much more independent than we have been in decades. And that was blown up. That was blown up.
Empire Strikes Back. Well, say hello to Lonnie for me on Thursday night.
Yeah. Lonnie, this is going to be great. Lonnie and Ralph together on the same call in the same show. I can't wait. It's going to be stellar. It's going to be glorious. Two dudes from D.C. Okay. Mike.
Should be fun.
Oh, hell yeah. Mike, thank you ever so kindly for being here, and I will chat you up, and we'll do this again next month, because as we both know, there will be more new abrogations to talk about.
It'll progress another month, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hopefully we've all earned parole by then. But...
Yeah. I'm working on my Mandarin even as we speak.
All right, BZ. Thank you, brother.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Take care and good night. God bless, sir.
You too. Thank you.
That was Mike Fitzpatrick, and that was also Kaiser. And, well, that was also this, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct right here from the sumptuous, palatial, and resplendent SHR Media Studios, where I'm broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California. You want to contact me? I am really active on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Okay, Tiaras by My Little Pony. I got that out. Thanks to my personal KC-130... Should I just give it up? Okay, thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team with whom I will be consorting in less than an hour. And if you don't have at least 7 bottles of vodka in your garage, you're a piker. So, thanks to Mike for being here tonight, live. Thanks to you for being in chat, everybody. Thanks for the people listening on Facebook. Thanks for listening in podcast. Later on, I'm going to put this out. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Thursday night, Ralph Chittum Sr. and Lonnie Poindexter be here. God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night.
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.
Now you know the rest of the story.
That's all, folks.